right, welcome everybody. We're just coming in from the lobby. Great to see everyone. We got another great, well-attended event. Thanks for joining all. As you probably know, I'm Andrew Kirsch. I receive a lot of your questions and notes on LinkedIn directly to our email inbox, and so I wanted to take some time and figure I would address them all, or as many as I could, in whatever time we have together. Of the great questions I get about national security, about CSIS, my career. I spent just under a decade as an intelligence officer with CSIS. Wrote a book about my experience. I was never here. If anyone wants free chapters, please email us, info@kirschgroup.com, and we will send you some free chapters of the book. And as we just admit some more folks. So I have everyone hear me okay, I hope, I trust. I see nothing in the chat that says you can't. If any issues, throw something in the chat. Any questions come up, throw them in the chat, and we will try to get to them. So yeah, throw in the chat so we can see any questions or concerns. I got Otis here with me who can address if there are any issues. All right. So the way I thought we'd do this is I got many questions submitted in advance. I can go through those, and as I said, if we have any extra, please send them in the chat along, and I will add them to the list, and we'll see what we can do in the next hour, and then we'll do this again if there's an appetite and people have more questions. Happy to try to organize another event. So without further ado, for our National Security Q&A, March 2025, from your experience managing teams, what skill sets are required to be an exceptional candidate for being an IO or a surveillant? So we did a Q&A with a surveillant, my old buddy Pat, and I encourage anyone. It's on YouTube, posted on our YouTube channel. Under Andrew Kirsch YouTube channel, about the surveillant role specifically. But I guess I can say for both. Here's the thing about being an intelligence officer, a surveillant, working in national security. You got to be prepared to ask. You got to be prepared to feel a little uncomfortable. You got to sometimes kind of fake it till you make it a little bit, or be super confident in what you're doing. We have this old expression, whether it's special operations, I'm sure surveillance have the same. I was an intelligence officer, that it's only weird if you make it look weird. And you're going to ask people sometimes personal questions. You're going to ask them to do exceptional things. If you don't have the confidence in what you're doing, if you can't exude that confidence in what you're doing, you're not going to project that onto other people. They're not going to want to help you. You don't have to lie. You don't have to fake. You can be extremely sincere about it, but you got to be prepared to ask. You got to step outside. If you're naturally an introvert, as I am, you got to find it in yourself to be prepared to ask people tough questions, do some challenging things, and kind of summon that in yourself to do it. You will feel great afterwards. Some of the most challenging conversations that I had were the most rewarding. Some of the special operations that made me the most nervous. Obviously, when you accomplish that goal, when you're able to go and get someone's help. I'll tell a quick story from what I mean. I had to go and we want to get access to somebody's house. And I can't really tell you why we wanted access to this person's house. I couldn't tell the person why we wanted access to their house, but we wanted access to this person's house, and they were a good person. We wanted their help, and they couldn't be there for what we wanted to do in their home. That's just, I know it's extremely vague, but imagine I have to knock on these people's door and I say, I need to use your house. You can't be here while we do what we need to do in your home, and it's because of the geographic location. That's the most that I can tell you. I am from CSIS. You can't tell anybody that I was here. I can't give you any paperwork that says why I'm here and what I'm doing. And you have to be prepared to ask that question of somebody else with the confidence that we do this all the time. Of course, totally natural, totally normal. You know, no problems, no issues. You know, it's an odd feeling. You know it's weird. They know it's weird, but they don't want you to project that it's weird. So, skill sets, exceptional candidate for being an IO or surveillance. There's a confidence. There's a willingness to ask tough questions. There is, I would say that to get the most out of the people we work with and to get the most out of your own team is somebody who's willing to do that. And that's where kind of leaders emerge in the team as you see who can do that kind of thing, get that stuff done. Tricky stuff needs to get done. Let me, by the way, the family said yes. They let us their house for the day. They left. We sent them, the best I could do for them was a gift card to go see a movie and have dinner, and national security victory. Yeah, you walk out of that going, I can't believe they did that. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Next question. I applied to CSIS twice, get this a lot. Applied to CSIS, tell surveillance, so I haven't heard back from them. I know it takes time. How do I know if I'm in the pool or not? It's a terrible thing how long it takes for any time you apply to CSIS in any role. It's one of those situations too where no news is sometimes good news. I believe back in my day when I was there, they would send you a letter if you were no longer under consideration. I think that is still the case. However, while you're going through the process, there could be long stretches where you don't hear anything. I don't know if 6 months is long or not, or what is a reasonable expectation of time, but I can tell you that it can be quite long as they go through these periods of reviewing applications and moving people through the process. And to try to explain one of the reasons why that is, for the IO position at least, surveillance can be a little different because they can hire in ones and twos. For the IO positions, are trying to build a training class. So they have classes that they run in September or January, whenever that is. You know, for mine was the first week of September after Labor Day. And they have a class that they anticipate having 20 odd, 15, I don't know, whatever the numbers are, intelligence officers. And they have to get trainers for that class. They have to get instructors, guest lecturers, you know, they have to build this class. And so they work backwards from that class to say, okay, well, we have a budget to run this training course. How are we going to get 15, 20, 25 candidates? And it takes a very long time. So they open up the intelligence officer pool and they take X number of applicants. And then that gets weeded down through the informational interview, psychological assessment, role playing, polygraph, blah, 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 and gets weeded down to that group of whatever it is. So as you can imagine, to start with a big pool and every step is kind of narrowing it down. And I don't work for HR, I never did. And I don't know if they have targeted numbers at each stage or whatever that is, but they're trying to work it back and time it to line up with making sure they can give acceptances to people in time for a class. Some candidates may need to go to French language training for months, as I did. Some candidates, security, like background checks, may take longer than the time that they had allotted, and they'll miss that window for selection for a September class. And where they're running them continuously, that can be less of a challenge. But where they only run 1 or 2 classes a year, you know, it can be a numbers game. And I feel terrible for the folks who make it very, very far in the process and they don't get offered a position. And it might be you or the 21st person in a 20-person class. And the challenge they have is if you get a job and there is no room for you in a class, then what do you do? Right. And that's not a question on here, but I can tell you from experience, it doesn't always line up. I got hired, I passed my French language training, and my class didn't start for 3 months. So now I'm just kind of an untrained person who hasn't been trained as an intelligence officer as a resource there that is of limited value or utility. And they want to limit the number of people they have floating around in that state, which is kind of untrained, unassigned, with a training class coming on. So I have sympathy for the recruitment people. I still think it takes too long. And I know there's a number of folks who sit in limbo for long periods of time. They are just trying to match up their end requirements with this initial big pool of candidates, which they know will get weeded down, right? And even at the end, when they send out offers, let's say they send out offers, not everyone's going to accept, right? It's been in some cases 15 months, a year since you applied to CSIS. You might say, no, my life has changed. I got married, I had a kid, I don't want to move. So they also have to take that in consideration with the last piece. So that kind of, why is my application taking so long? And is there a time to hear back? Unfortunately, I can't give you the specifics. All I can try to explain is a little bit of why that is, and encourage you to go out and reach out directly if they give you a number or contact information to reach out directly to HR to see if you can get more information. But often no news is not bad news. It means you're still being considered. All right. I got a lot of great questions, so I'm trying to tick them off. Is it possible to get promoted from a surveillance officer to an intelligence officer? It's a great question. And not just from intelligence officer to a surveillance officer, but anywhere within CSIS. You know, one of the things, and I say this for all national security, I give this advice to people who are looking for a career in national security or anywhere in the public service, to be honest. The hardest part is often getting in. And once you get in and distinguish yourself, improve yourself, and meet people, it is often easier to move around and to apply for different internal roles because you will know the people, you will have relevant experience, you will already have your background checks and security clearances. You know, that can be an easier process. And for a time, and I kind of encourage everyone to consider that is take a role in an organization you're interested in, with a caveat that there are still requirements for roles. So way back when I first joined, there was a requirement for all intelligence officers to have a university college degree, a degree of some sort. And that was not a requirement for surveillance officers. And so we had surveillance officers who were fantastic and had skills and experience and did 10 years, 15 years on the road working for CSIS, who would then want to apply to be an intelligence officer, and they would say, no, you don't have a university degree. And they would say, this is ridiculous. I've been here. I know how this place works. I've proven myself. I have all these things, all this experience. They would be a great asset to the organization. But because they had that standard, they were not allowed. So people complained, rightfully so. And what did CSIS do? They made surveillance officers have the requirement to get a university degree, I believe, or at least they did back then. So they raised the minimum standard for everybody so that they wouldn't have the internal conflict of people looking to move without the credentials. So in answer, is it possible to get promoted? And let me actually take a step back and say, it is not a promotion to move from a surveillance officer to intelligence officer. If any of my colleagues are watching, let me say that quite clearly here. That is a very unique role and function with specific skill sets required, and there are would never consider that a promotion. That is a move to a different team with different requirements. But can you move from one to another? Yes. Will there still be requirements you need to have before you can make those changes? Yes, there will be, and they're pretty tough about it. So if you're going to use getting in under one role to move to another, make sure that you will satisfy all requirements because it's still a government job, and that can still trip some people up, and they're still sticklers for that where there are requirements. What is the difference between intelligence officer and surveillance officer? Once again, did a great session with a former surveillance officer, a buddy of mine, and we had a full Q&A just on the role of surveillance officers. That's its own unique team. Their job, they are a resource for investigations. The surveillance teams get deployed to follow and gather information on the activities, contacts, conduct of subjects of investigation. So if I'm an intelligence officer and I am overseeing an investigation into a subject of interest, once they've reached a threshold of investigations, like you can't just throw surveillance on anybody. They have to be a certain level of threat. One, because of rules and privacy and all those types of things, but also because surveillance is an extremely limited resource. You don't just follow one person with one person. You need a team of experienced surveillance to follow an individual around, and therefore they are in high demand. And we want surveillance on all of our subjects of investigation. So to get surveillance means that person, one, is involved in threat-related activities, and also that surveillance can help further that investigation. We believe that this person is meeting with people we don't know, so we want to follow them around to see. We believe this person is, going certain places we don't know about, and we want to see where they're going and what they're doing. We also, as it comes to surveillance, have to have, so what are we trying to find out? Surveillance is to fill an information gap. So if the investigation says we have this gap, how are we going to fill it? We want to find out who they're meeting with. We're gonna put an application in, or get some surveillance for a day, and send a team out to follow him around and see, okay, who's he having coffee with? Where is he going? Is he nervous? Is he looking over his shoulder? Is he if you think he's being followed? They can see a lot from that too. And that changes as well. I'll tell you, surveillance is such a valuable resource. And if you have surveillance on your person during a day, that's huge. You can get a lot of great information from it. But things come up all the time. So it's not uncommon at CSIS where you have surveillance scheduled for a day, and someone will come to you and say, Andrew, I need your surveillance. I just found out my target is having a meeting today, and I got to see who's at this meeting, or I got to see where he's going. And I say, well, I haven't had surveillance in a couple of weeks, and I kind of need it. And you go to okay, well, who's got it tomorrow? Can we switch with them? And you're running around, trying to triage these types of requests just to speak to how valuable surveillance is. And then at some point, someone decides who gets it, and away they go. So in answer to the question, that's what's the difference. Intelligence officers will oversee a national security investigation. They can do the field investigations piece, which is knocking on doors and collecting. And they can also do the analysis piece, which is kind of reviewing all the information that comes in. Surveillance is a very particular type of collection, and that is a specific team with skills and training and experience that go out and follow folks around, spend a lot of time in cars or on the foot following people. So that's kind of the difference. For more information on surveillance, go check out the previous YouTube, the Q&A, and it's just an hour of talking to a former surveillant about what that life is like. All right. Let's see. How do you prepare for CSIS recruitment? This is a great question. I know a lot of people here who have interest in joining CSIS. So they tell you when you get that, you're going to apply online if you want to apply. And I'm not HR. Once again, full disclaimers, I don't work for HR. I did not work in HR. I was there. But having gone through the process, I can tell you there are no surprises. Okay. This was just joking today about, is this a trick? Is this a trap? There are actually very few surprises. When you go, if you submit your application online, there's no other way to do it. If you get selected and they call you in, they say, learn the mandate. Learn the CSIS mandate. You will be asked about it, and you will be asked about it because you're going to use it every day in your career. So if you want to prepare for recruitment, is learn the mandate. CSIS is mandated to collect, analyze, and advise government on threats to the security of Canada. There are 4 main threats. They're espionage and sabotage, foreign influenced activities, terrorism, and subversion. You will need to know that. They may ask you questions about, give an example of foreign influenced activities. Why is CSIS interested in this? Is there an example in the news? The difference between Section 12, which is collecting information in Canada domestically, and Section 16, foreign intelligence, and the when CSIS can and under what circumstances collect foreign intelligence. But they're going to ask you about the mandate. And then when you graduate, and I can see the picture behind me of a former director and me, he's handing me a bound copy of the mandate with my badge, because every day you're going to go out there and you're going to be collecting, analyzing, or advising government on threats to the security of Canada and the 4 main threats, and collecting information on those 4 threats. One thing I really appreciated about CSIS was pretty clear about what we were there to do. It's in the mandate. Oh, you're a surveillant, you're collecting. You're an analyst, you're analyzing. Like, you were mandated to do this. This is what we're looking at. So for your recruitment, you don't have to memorize the mandate, but certainly know it and know what you're getting yourself into, because they're going to ask you about it. That's yeah. And then I would say also, figure out what you're going to tell people. Should you go down that route, right? At some point, you're going to have to hand over the names and birth dates and hometowns of your family, and give some names to be interviewed as a security reference checks. At some point you might want to start to consider, well, what happens if I get this job? What am I going to tell people that I do? And who am I going to tell? And am I prepared to go to Ottawa for a few years? It is a big life change. And it is asking a lot of the people closest to you. So you might want to if you start making it down that road, think about, how does that fit in with my life? And I will tell you, it is, I've often said this, the only thing worse than lying to everybody about what you do, is telling them the truth and then asking them to lie for you, right? So you're going to tell your siblings, hey, I'm going to work for CSIS, don't tell anybody. And then the whole time they're there, every time that someone asks them, hey, what does Andrew do? They're like, well, I don't know. He moved to Ottawa. He didn't tell me. Just be prepared. You're about to ask a lot of the people closest to you, and to start to consider that and how to manage that. So that's how I would prepare for CSIS recruitment. Be prepared in case you get the job. Yeah. Advice to young adults on identity management is a great question. Oof, I don't know. I consider myself extremely fortunate that I went through and had my career I did when I did. Identity management was still a concern when I was there. Facebook existed. It wasn't weird if you weren't on it. I don't believe we had Instagram or Snapchat, or at least there wasn't kind of pressure to be on it. At some point, being invisible is weirder than having profiles you don't use, and having some sort of presence and some sort of online identity is good. And just kind of owning that and controlling that, versus anytime one thing pops up about you, that becomes the only Googleable search or hit. You want to bulletproof your profile a little bit. I am sure there are folks there who have a better guidance than I do about how to best do that. The advice I give to people, everyone wants to be invisible. No one wants to be, everyone wants to be invisible these days. And maybe if you have a very, very common name, that's easier than not, because you start Googling, Mike Smith, John Smith, and it's tough to wade through it all. I always felt it was good to have something of a profile so that you existed in the real world, but in a limited way. But there was some sort of story about you that was understandable and looked legitimate and answered the first question, right? I've heard some people want to set up kind of dummy profiles of themselves, and they say, I'm Andrew, but I'm this, not this. And if people look, then they say, well, I don't want to look for Andrew the this. I actually think there's another Andrew out there who's this. And can you survive two searches No, you want someone to find you. You want them to be legitimate, but you want to tell the story that you want to tell. So I would say building the profile that you control, that information that you are purposely putting out into the world, bland, benign, own your domain, I would say have social medias that you've planted your flag, but nothing is there. Control your privacy settings. So, limited amount of information is available about you, but you still look like a legitimate person is probably the best way that I would go about it. Once again, it's advanced since I was there. I mean, I think that it's gotten very, 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 very hard to be covert and travel covertly these days. So I'd be curious how they do it. This is a good question. I think in general, techniques for stress management, difficult conversations you learned from your career with CSIS. Stress management is you get very, very close to the people you work with because they're the only ones who understand what you're going through, and you build very good relationships because everyone needs to decompress with someone who understands. And that can be a challenge with people in your life that you can't talk openly and freely to, but it's still important to be able to kind of vent frustrations, share, and so that that exists there. I would say everybody to have that inner circle that you feel like you can lean on and trust and vent and when I left CSIS, those people that I was very close with, definitely I miss, and can no longer have those relationships because you're out and you're not privy to the information anymore that they were once privy to, and therefore you're not able to share or decompress, and so that's a big challenge with leaving. I think also for difficult conversations, and this is something that's very applicable. I'm a pleaser. I know this about myself. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. I want harmony, peace in my life with those around me. But sometimes you have to ask a tough question. And sometimes you have to not just ask the tough question, but let the person answer it or not. So understanding myself when I would put a tough question to somebody and sitting in an uncomfortable silence and knowing that it's uncomfortable, it's eating me up alive. I want to tell a joke. I want to, laugh it off. I want to let the person off the hook. I can't do it. This is part of the job, and understanding, my discomfort, it shouldn't get in the way of the job that I need to do. So that was, and I think it continues to be something that I'm very aware of. And we all have different levels of comfort, right? There's some folks who could sit in a room quiet and feel no discomfort. And that's also like a superpower, in my opinion, where they don't feel that stress. They don't worry about making other people uncomfortable. They are, and not in a malicious way. That's just how people are. So kind of understanding that, that we're all different there. And so when you're having that, like I would have to gear myself up just looking at that, the difficult conversation. I would go in and say, this is going to get weird. And this is going to be uncomfortable, but I need to have this conversation. This is my job. This is going to be tough for me to do. I cannot let the other person off the hook. And ultimately this will get us to a better place going forward. So, we're all going to be a little uncomfortable right now to be better going forward. And just, an awareness of that, I think, is in life too. I mean, this is not just being a spy and saying, tell me how you know this person, and then sitting and seeing the person squirm. There's a lot of folks who are conflict avoidant, and sometimes we avoid conflict and it makes things worse. So I try to be very deliberate and purposeful and say, okay, does having a conflict now and a tough conversation save me from a broader and longer and wider confrontation down the road? And if that's the case, then we're going to have to do it. It's going to be bad. But I, gear myself up to do it. So great question. The question here, well, which regional office would you want to work for in 2024 if you were to start all over again, or 2025? So for those, CSIS has obviously headquarters, main office in Ottawa, and then has regional offices across the country. This is publicly available information, I believe. I think it's on Wikipedia. Toronto, obviously being a large one, Montreal, out west, there's some different sizes. And it's interesting, Ottawa's got a regional office too. Very interesting that it changes for people, right? Toronto is a lot of activity, a lot of action. You want to be involved in some of the bigger investigations that we have going on. People want to be in Toronto, but it's extremely expensive to live in Toronto. So you have to make a quality of life decision and say, yeah, I want to be where the action is, but I also don't want to live in a shoebox downtown. And for a while, a lot of people did. So there's this attractive part of, I'm going to go and live in Ottawa and work for headquarters, and maybe that's not as much activity, but I got a 4-car garage, and I'm home at 5 o'clock, versus running around at all hours as part of a big investigation. People want to be close to home. CSIS is across Canada, and so there are a lot of folks who are from out east who want to go back home out east, and certainly from out west and want to go live out west. I'm born and raised in Toronto. I always wanted to come back to Toronto, and if I did it all again, I would still be here. I would have made my career here and stuck around the whole time. It can be limiting to stay in a regional office. There are obviously some offices are small, and maybe there's one managerial position. Maybe there is one DG, and you start getting up and moving up in the ranks, and people go back to Ottawa because there's a lot of desk heads and there's a lot of deputy chiefs and so on and so forth. So if you stay in a small region, that can be limiting as far as your career progression. If there's someone above you, it sticks around. And if you're in a small region and you happen to date or marry someone you work with, there are rules about supervising a spouse and working together, and that can also be limiting, and that happens a fair bit. So couples need to, go to a region where there can be no conflicts of them working together. So for me, Toronto, I'd be Toronto. I loved it here. Want to stay, born and raised, but people have a range of. So let me take some questions from the chat, folks who joined. I saw there were some in there, and I want to kind of thank folks who came out and read some of the questions halfway through. When you were in training, do you stay in a dorm room, and what are the day-to-day tasks? Well, it's probably changed a bit since I was there. When you go to, it's probably changed a little bit. So I can only speak to my experience, but when you first sign up, when we first signed up, you didn't know where you were going to go, where your first post would be. So there was this idea that you could maybe live temporarily and then be sent back to a region where you were. So they didn't want to make big life decisions. You were able to buy a condo in Ottawa, as I did, and then if you 6 months, I get transferred back to Toronto, sell my condo and move back. But some folks did stay in temporary kind of furnished apartments, and that was how they lived for 6 months until they realized, okay, I'm going to get my post and I'm going to be here for the next 4 years, and then I can make longer term plans, especially if you have family, right? If you think about some folks join, they're married with kids that come from Toronto, they go to Ottawa for their training, and they say, well, I'm going to sell my house and only to move back to Toronto in 6 months. Didn't make a lot of sense. So people would stay temporarily in accommodations, and it's not a dorm room, but it did have a little bit of a college feel to it. You get, bunch of youngish professionals moving from all over the country into Ottawa. No one knows anybody else. It feels like a freshman orientation, class, and people go out for drinks, and it can be a lot of fun, especially for the folks who live kind of close together. They become very, very close. Training classes become very close for that reason. So yeah, you can either kind of relocate and then take it from there. Now it might be different, but back in my day, they put some people up temporarily. I relocated right away, thinking that if I had to move again, I'd move again. Okay, here's if you could compare the culture of a CSIS special operations team to a sports team, what sport would you say and why? That's a good question. I guess, I mean, I kind of want to say basketball because there's different skills. Like, you have a point guard who can dribble the ball, and a center who's big and tall and, can block shots. And you have all these different skills that you put together. Although basketball now is a lot of the same height and all this kind of things. But this idea that you are putting this group of different talents and skills together to work in a coordinated way, often directed by a team lead or a point guard, I would say, who's saying, you go here, you get the ball, move around. I think that is, didn't have not having the question in advance, more or less than a hockey team. I don't know. Baseball team, just the numbers of the baseball are very big, and baseball is very one-on-one. And special operations are moving pieces, and everyone's in touch, moving at all times. Hey, can you check the hallway? Okay, just check the hallway. I'm in the stairwell. I'm going here. And you are constantly moving and supporting each other. So that's where I would maybe lean to basketball as far as a culture or the fit with the coach. You drop a play, and everyone moves around, and you do it. So that's a good interesting question. Maybe I'll make an extended YouTube video about that because I like that question, actually. Let's see. What if we have law enforcement education or background and still earn a university degree in criminology or political science, work in CSIS as a surveillance, become intelligence officer through that route? Yeah, I look, for all the rules, you're going to have to check. You're going to have to check online and see what the requirements are, and just know it's a government job, and they're going to stick to the requirements. And I don't know if they use whatever the machine it is they use to pump CVs through, but I assume that if it does not find a university degree, a G driver's license, X, Y, and Z, whatever those requirements are, you probably get screened out. I even tell students this: if you're applying, and it's one thing if you're a month away from graduating, you can say, look, I'm graduating in a month, and you can apply. But if you're 6 months away from graduating and you haven't graduated yet, they may not accept your application. So whatever they say, you want to make sure you satisfy. So yeah, if you become a surveillant, and while you're there get a degree and want to transfer over, yeah, once you get the degree, once you tick that box, then you qualify internally for whatever you want to do. And there's often opportunities at CSIS for professional development. Certainly they encourage folks to study for languages. I had a friend who did law school and then was kind of articled with the Department of Justice as a CSIS lawyer. They are not going to say no if you want to do some professional development within reason about what they're willing to pay for and the time commitment. They're pretty open to that. If you can make a case on why this is important for what you're doing or how it could be, I think they would be open to that. So I would say, yes, they will accept you based on what you have. And once you get more, they will consider you for more. And then as far as given Canada the current threat environment is approaching the creation of a foreign service, which CSIS will very likely have close association, means higher security requirements. CSIS is prepared for that. Is CSIS prepared for a foreign intelligence service? Should we have a foreign intelligence service? This is a question that comes up a lot. There are many people who argue that Canada should have a foreign intelligence service. And that is an intelligence service with a specific mandate to collect information on foreign countries and governments. And that can be for a number of different reasons. Pardon me as I get this sun out of my eyes. That can be for having trade negotiations with a foreign country and want to understand what their trade negotiations are. Spy on foreign governments in foreign countries to pass information to our domestic, you know, to help us domestically. And my question always is, if you could tell me what information we're missing, what information we want to collect on a foreign intelligence perspective, then I'll consider it. But we seem to want to have this idea of it's a bit of cart before the horse. We need a foreign intelligence service, so therefore we can do something. Well, tell me what it is you want to do, and then I'll tell you if we need a foreign intelligence service to do it, right? CSIS has some powers to collect foreign intelligence in a limited way. So if that needs to be expanded, there is a very simple change to the CSIS Act that they can do and give us additional powers. But I still haven't heard an argument, and people feel free to send this to me if you would like, about what it is that we expect our foreign intelligence service to collect for us that we can't get now and that we need. You know, what are our foreign objectives and foreign policies that we want a foreign intelligence service to further? I don't know if we have a good answer for that. And until we do, I'd be very nervous about sending folks out running around across the world in foreign countries, just kind of collecting intelligence on foreign governments. We, you know, people don't like that. Foreign governments don't like that. And you start bumping up, and certain foreign governments really don't like that. And those are often the foreign governments that people want to collect information about, which can cause some diplomatic issues. And I'm not sure if we're ready for that. And I don't know what we are lacking right now that would make that a requirement. So in terms of the other question there, higher security, is CSIS prepared for, CSIS the highest security requirements in the world. Like, we can share with NATO allies, we can do all sorts of things. I don't think it's an issue of higher security clearance requirements. It is a question of risk appetite. Are we prepared to spy on foreign governments with the risk of being caught and those foreign governments finding out? And is the information that we're after so important that we would take that risk? Let's see. Oh, this is great. How can someone with a psychology background contribute to CSIS or the broader field of national security? This is a great question. CSIS has psychologists for a number of different roles. So we can, when you apply to CSIS, you have to go through a litany of tests. And one of them is psychological assessment, where we take the Myers-Briggs. I don't know what they still do, but you get the 200 question questionnaire or test, and it says, X, Y, and Z. Do you hear voices? How do you spend your time? What kind of leader are you? Like this, multiple choice. And it's reviewed by a psychologist to make sure that you have the kind of profile or don't have have a profile that they are looking for and don't have a profile that they want to avoid. And there are psychologists, internal psychologists that I believe help with that process. We also use psychologists to better understand some of our targets and sources. And to help us with the profiles. And I don't think that's top secret, or maybe it is. But no, I don't think it would be, because they're constantly hiring people that would, help us understand and further our investigations. And that is another role that I'm sure that if you look and put applications in, I don't know what that would be described as, but yeah, there's a component to investigation. You're trying to figure out what, motivations and how we help someone, or how do we figure out what they're up to. And I believe that would be a useful skill and experience to have in terms of, that kind of background. So for vetting our own people and vetting other people, the other one, I'll go back to my sheet. OSINT. Let me do this one. I'll do that to OSINT. The relationship with the U.S. very topical, and yeah, I was actually just talking to an American member of an American allied agency bureau, the U.S. about what's going on over there, and without kind of getting into it too much. CSIS only has a domestic intelligence service, which obviously means we rely very closely on our partnerships with what we call the Five Eyes intelligence community, the Americans, the British, the Australians, and New Zealanders. It's extremely close. It is, we share information freely. Liaison officials kind of walk amongst the building, popping in offices, talking very candidly and openly for the most part. We still have the need to know principles and all that, but I'm just saying that it's a very, with our Five Eyes partners, it is a very, very close intelligence sharing relationship. And the foundation of that intelligence sharing relationship is that we share national security threats, and we can trust our partners with our most secret national security secrets. And, I don't know, right? Like, are we still aligned on our threats, or some of our partners, demonstrating some threatening behavior? Yeah. And can we trust all of our partners with our most secrety secrets? Like, individually, the people I worked with, I would, but if we were to send some information over to the Americans and then we lose all control about who gets to access what, I don't know how comfortable we would be at this present moment in time. So I think that relationship is, I am sure, going through some review. And this should not be a secret. And the Americans are probably I know they're having this conversation internally about, even in their own agencies and bureaus, about who they trust, and people are threatened to be fired. And it sounds like there are lists about who's at the in and who is out, who can be trusted and who can't be trusted. And that's all internal stuff, let alone with foreign countries. So, I think Canada is going to have to be cautious, or more cautious, about information that is shared and where that could go, as well as information that it receives, and how much we can trust information received. It's just this new gray cloud kind of hanging over everything, and it's incredibly sad, because we did greatly benefit from this open relationship. Were there things that bumped up along the way? Absolutely. We would have leaks, they would have leaks. Nothing more embarrassing than a leak in your domestic agency that affected your partners. That is a horrible situation to have. If you look at, we had Delisle, a very public case. The Americans have very public cases. You overcome these bumps because everybody, by and large, is pulling in the same direction. Mistakes happen. We do our best to move on. But it appears like there may be a fundamental shift in that relationship and the level of trust that we can have in them safeguarding our information and sharing our interests. So, yeah, let's all watch that space and see what happens. That is extremely complicated. Let me go back here, because there's a couple of the good ones I want to get to for the folks who submitted questions in advance. I hope this is helpful in any way. I enjoy it. I hope you do too. I love the questions. Yeah. What are you allowed to put down your LinkedIn or resume that you worked for CSIS? I do. Yes, others do. Many don't. So what can I say about this? CSIS is not a secret organization. It is an organization with secrets. CSIS is not a clandestine organization. There is a big building that says CSIS on it that people work in. Obviously, regional offices are a little more discreet, covert, and at all points in your career, it will be hammered into you about discretion, practicing discretion. Discretion is a very broad word, right? Who are you going to tell? Who are you not going to tell? Well, you have to manage a lot of that yourself. One of the reasons why I left is because I got tired of managing that. I wanted to be public about not, what I just, not just where I worked, but just on a day-to-day basis, not feel like I was lying to people all the time and trying to keep track of who I lied to and who I didn't and what I told people. And it felt after a while, it just felt silly, right? I would go and knock on doors and tell people, hi, my name is Andrew. I work from CSIS. I had a badge that said CSIS on it with my name and face. And then at night I would lie to people about where I worked and what I did and not tell my wife where I was that day. Didn't feel great. So now that I've left, I'm very public about where I worked. I obviously wrote a book, but many aren't. And obviously, being public about being a former intelligence officer, there are certainly countries that I would not plan to travel to. And I am probably very susceptible to, people, I think I have secrets. I don't know. I don't, it's not like I took any secrets. You can't leave with information. I wrote everything I know in my book. But that draws attention. And if you want to have a continued career where you can be covert and continue to do affiliated work and own your identity and discretion, people keep it to themselves. And I am super cautious about when I talk about other colleagues that I'm clear about whether they are open about where they worked or they didn't, right? And if I introduce a friend or I'm out for a beer with a friend, then I know what I'm telling people, what I'm not, about how I know that person. So everyone has to continue to manage their identity in their own way. I didn't get any direction when I left about that. I don't know how they could, but it's to my level of comfort, other people's level of comfort. Great question. We talked about where you're able to apply internally, and okay. Here's a so this is a question I talk a lot about. How does CSIS manage public perception and maintain transparency while operating a domain that often requires secrecy? And this is like the question, right? So my old boss, Ray Boisvert, used to say, and this is the Office of National Security Advisor, so I'm giving away names, but what is the point of having all this great information if we can't tell anybody about it, especially the people who need it to protect themselves, keep themselves safe, right? Ultimately, CSIS exists to collect, analyze, and advise government on threats to the security of Canada. I think that should be broader to advise the public on threats to the security of Canada, right? We have a habit here of being complacent, and it is unfortunate that people really start to care about national security when something happens, something bad happens, a bomb goes off. Well, the time to care about national security was obviously before. Politicians can be slow to act, and they don't always act until something makes the cover of the newspaper. Well, raising awareness of threats and concerns maybe can prompt some acting and keep some people from being complacent. So I think CSIS needs to find that balance. I would absolutely be more open, be more public, be more transparent. This is coming from someone who wrote a book. So of course, and people in the organization didn't like it, don't like it. And they think that spies should be neither seen nor heard and silently working in the shadows. I disagree. I am a far better recruiter now that I am public about where I work than I ever was when I was at CSIS, because people come up to me all the time and say, Andrew, there's a problem. I didn't know where to go. Now I know that you worked at CSIS. Can you put me in touch with somebody? I'd like to talk to someone about it, right? We were asking people, we were going to complete strangers and asking them for help and not leveraging our personal networks of people who I knew I could trust, because I was trying to create some secrecy around what I did and what I worked on. So I think to be more transparent, I think be more public, I think to raise the alerts and the alarms, to explain the mandate of CSIS to people and help them understand that these are the threats and these are the threats that CSIS needs help with is very, very important. And we need to do more than we are currently doing while maintaining discretion around how we do it and like, sources and methods. I can't tell you how I know this information. I can only tell you what I know. And, people might sometimes that can be tricky, right? One of the things that we would have to do in my earlier analyst days, I'm sensitive to time and I'll try to get to one or two more. We try to report information, right? And you'd get information, you'd see there was two people in a meeting and the one person said this. And then you go, well, I think I know who the source is, right? Like, which you don't want to send that information out. You got to figure out how to obscure it and whatnot. So, we have to figure out how to keep our sources and methods and secret, to protect those people who provide us information, to protect the ways that we gather information so that we don't give any tips to our adversaries, and, protect the safety and security of the people who help us. At the same time, if that piece of information is really crucial to keeping people safe, we got to find a way to get it out somehow. And that's the balance that I don't think we get right, that we should continue to work on. Okay. Here we go. A couple questions. What is the single greatest threat to Canadian national security right now? You can say it was greatest accomplishment during your cruises. Okay, two great questions, and that question got 2 thumbs up. So I will answer it. And here's greatest threat. Well, it changes. I don't say changes, but there are 4 main threats for those joining late. CSIS is mandated to collect, analyze, and advise government on threats to the security of Canada. They are foreign espionage and sabotage, foreign influenced activities, terrorism, and subversion. We just had a public inquiry in Canada about foreign interference, about foreign governments meddling in our democracy and manipulating our elections in a way to further their interests. That's a huge threat, like an existential threat to our sovereignty. We have recently had arrests in the north of Toronto and Ottawa of individuals who are alleged to be ISIS-inspired attackers. In one case, these father-son duo are apparently making a martyr video or some sort of video where they're standing in front of a flag with axes and swords and get ready to go out to some community to cause death and destruction. What is a bigger threat than the other one? Don't make me choose. We are constantly facing these threats, and when one makes the news, it doesn't mean the other one went away. And CSIS's job is to triage that with resources as much as we possibly can. I would say that the threat of terrorism is ongoing, and depending on what's happening in the world, more people can be radicalized, and that is something that we need to keep very, very close tabs on, as well as the existential threat to our sovereignty, which is foreign interference, espionage, and sabotage, foreign governments, state-sponsored enterprises who are hacking us, stealing IP, causing economic security is huge. We don't have to think of national security in terms of economic security. We're going to have to start. That's a longer conversation for the minute or two we have left. And so I want to answer this last question. I'll answer this, and we'll do this again if people want to attend. As long as people want to attend, we'll do this. Greatest accomplishment during my career. So when I first got to Toronto Region, I was a field investigator. I was out knocking on doors, and like I just told this story at an event, I do public speaking. I was out knocking on doors, collecting information, and I went to speak to a community leader. There's a lot of reasons why CSIS will knock on your door. It is not just because often they think I'm in trouble. Furthest from the truth. We're looking for people to help us with our national security investigation, people who have access to threat-related information, people who are willing to tell us what that is. So I would I talked to community leaders, people by nature of their jobs, communities, networks, family, and just make friends, build rapport. And so I met with somebody early in my time in Toronto. We had a couple meetings. Just a community leader. I wanted to introduce myself. I wanted to tell him the things that I was investigating, the things that I was concerned about, and I wanted him to tell me, as a leader in the community, what he was concerned about, what he was seeing. 1 or 2 coffees, and that was it. Then I got transferred, went to special operations. 2 years later, he gave me a call, and he said, Andrew, I just had someone approach me in the community whose child has been talking about going abroad to join ISIS and to fight. This is kind of 2011, 12, and people are looking to go to Syria, Iraq, and join ISIS. So I wasn't working that file at the time. I had someone who was. I passed him off to my colleague, and they could chat. And I don't think it ever made the news. I don't think this was a big story, but they were able to kind of mitigate this risk, get the person not to go. What kind of solve this problem. And once I made the introduction, I had nothing else to do with it. But I think about this a lot, and I think it's my proudest accomplishment, because that coffee, that phone call, ended up 2 years later really mattering. And in my mind, that meant that every coffee I had mattered. And maybe it would be when I was there, maybe 2 years later, even continues to matter. Maybe 5 years later, someone else who I met is going to pick up the phone and call CSIS and say, I met this guy named Andrew, and he once told me that I should call you if I have this problem, and I'm calling you, right? It's not transactional. It takes time. It takes coffees. It takes building rapport. It takes building trust. And I'd like to think that over my career, I was able to do that in an enduring way. I like to think that there's a lot of times that happen that I don't know about because I don't have any information left, that maybe I was part of many of these big breaking investigations, and that not just that mattered, but in some way it all mattered, that everything I did mattered. So that's kind of my proudest, that even the day-to-day, you never know. You never know what coffee you're going to have, what contact you're going to make, what thing you're going to say. So you get out there, you do it, and you hope that down the road, it helps. And in that case, one case it did. And so that made me feel proud about that, and a pride that other things will help too. So look, that's kind of the time we have for today. I hope people enjoyed it. I think I really appreciate the questions. We will do this again down the road. So watch this space. If you're on our mailing list, info@kirschgroup.ca. If you want to get on our mailing list, so you can be advised. I do YouTube videos on our YouTube channel on questions that I get to answer them as well. Hey, on the issue of transparency, I am very much, let's tell people what they need to know. Let's help people who are applying to CSIS. I'm not here to talk anybody into or out of a career in national security, but maybe help prepare you a little bit for it and make you better at your jobs with learning all the lessons that I wish I'd known when I joined. So continue to reach out, continue to stay in touch. Thank you, everybody, for your time and for attending. I sincerely appreciate it. So we will speak again soon. Until then, as I like to say, stay safe.